Okay, so I was just saying, I hope everyone is brimming with questions because it's been like 2 months since we had a Q&A. Yeah.
2 months?
Okay.
Yeah.
First question.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, within my Jewish existentialism class,
Yeah.
so my professor was talking about the Jewish wisdom texts, right? So Mishlei, Kohelet, Eov, and
Shir, right.
And she was talking about how they're, in a sense, contrary to like the standard Jewish, like they present like an alternative, and they subvert some of like the standard traditional ways
Right.
of viewing things, not just within their ideas, but also within like so for sure, she was talking about how the way in which love is portrayed and the relationship is started is not in the traditional way. And she was talking about how also in terms of Mishlei, right? So the first part is attributed to Shlomo, and then the second part we've talked about as the Anshe Chizkiah, right? So she was talking about how it was actually through a Canaanite. And I was wondering, like, where that came
You're talking
from.
about the whole thing, or
No.
just the Anshe Chizkiah? Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard
that was, and that having a Canaanite be a part of that thing showed that Judaism recognizes wisdom from wherever it comes from, and not focusing on the source.
Was she getting that from like a modern source, or from us?
I have no idea.
Yeah, that we have that 30 puzzle cluster, right?
Right. You still P.
Yeah. She's talking about also, right? Shlomo is in reference to the Egyptian wisdom and thought, right?
Yeah.
So it is something that is taking general wisdom and then using it and reflecting it onto, and using it in contrast to, and contrasting it to different things.
Right.
So I was wondering if you heard anything about that, where that was coming from.
So I mean, I've only really heard things like that from like modern scholarship about like, to what extent did, plain shot is we hold that Shlomo HaMelech not only came up with the content, but like formulated everything, like wrote it all down, and that only when it says the parak of Anshe Chizkiyahu, meiosis, I don't know which one, right? Yeah, well, I guess we can't see whether he's half or whatever. No, whatever. Anyway, yeah, right. Anyway, so that's in our sources, and I think that there are, people who raise questions on it, either based on stylistic considerations, like Alter did, and like evidence from the seeing commonalities in ancient texts, or there's going to be the standard default assumption in much of academia that like they're going to try to come up with they're only going to accept the most recent, of the hypotheses about when it was written, and that's going to lead them to think that it was adopted from other people. I'm not aware of anything in our sources that say that Shlomo HaMelech got, let's say, like Mishlei from, that it was written down by anyone other than the author that it says, but I'm not sure. I mean, and if anything,
do we have any idea?
Yeah, so let's just check that out, because I'm sure that's something that the Mefarshim will address right on the spot.
My understanding was that it was
sorry, just a second, Isaac, say it again.
That it was a Canaanite convert that was
interesting.
part of.
Okay, so I guess we'll find out. It is possible. There's really two subdivisions at the end. There's Anshe Chizkiyahu, which is at the beginning of Aleph. Actually, let me call him Isaac first. Yeah, Isaac?
Yeah, I was just wondering about the...
Another bad audio quality, Isaac. So I can't hear you. I just heard you were wondering about something. Okay, we'll wait till you pull yourself auditorily together, and we'll read on. So, Gam Ele Mishlei Shlomo Asher Hetiku Anshe Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda. So that's the interesting phrase here. Also, these are the Mishlei Shlomo that were copied or transcribed. Let me see what the BDB translates this as. Transported. Yeah, I thought it meant to be copied. I think, transcribed. Yeah, very late, and that's 25:1. Yeah, right. Yeah, so that's transcribed to remove from one book or roll to another. Transtoler. I don't know what that is in Middle Hebrew. Yeah, to transport. Yeah. Should we try Isaac again? Yeah, Isaac, you want to see if we can hear you?
Yeah. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, for now.
Okay. Yeah, so I was wondering about the term wisdom literature.
Yeah.
Is that like a modern thing, or is there?
Yeah, so that's a modern thing. Okay, so it's a modern thing, but that has precedent in Shas, which is, I think they call wisdom literature, works on universal ethics and philosophy and theology that are not like portrayed as dependent on revelation. Is that an accurate?
Yeah.
Let me just see. Hold on a second. Wisdom literature is a genre of literature common in the ancient Near East. It consists of statements by sages and the wise that offer teachings about divinity and virtue. While this genre uses techniques of traditional oral storytelling, it was disseminated in written form.
Yeah. So what she was pointing out was that these texts, so in traditional texts, the main person or the main player, so to say, is God. Right? And so all the wisdom is primarily coming from God. And then the prophets are the ones experiencing this wisdom and like learning the wisdom from God. Whereas in the wisdom text, it's mostly a human writer and talking about like the human conversation side with God. Right? So she was saying, dividing between the rest of the Tanach is mostly like God's conversation with man. And then the wisdom texts are more man's conversation.
I definitely I hear that distinction. So in terms of where that category is acknowledged, I'm not aware of any place where that category defined by the content, is like explicitly acknowledged in our text. But there are these debates about whether various books of Tanakh are matame es hayadayim, which means that they come from Ruach HaKodesh, or like there's statements about this is just Chachma Shel Shlomo, and the two can overlap. Like it could be Chachma of Shlomo and inspired by Ruach HaKodesh. So Isaac, that's the only like place that I am aware of. That's all I know about that. Okay, but let's check this out. So Rashi is interesting. Says hetiku is hechaziku, that they embraced or strengthened or reinforced these, but it still does imply that there's a distinction here, right? So he gives a little story here. Chizru l'dorsham, they returned to expound on them. Oh, so it's two hetikus. Okay, Kishanismana Chizkiyahu Melech, when Chizkiyahu was appointed as king, Hoshiv Talmidim b'chol ir v'ir, so he set up Talmidim in each and every city. That was part of his Torah restoration project. Kidamrinan b'chelek badku midan v'ad be'er shava v'lomatu amharetz, right? That they did a investigation from Dan to Beersheba and saw that there's no Amaretz, right? Those are good times for Torah. Okay, let's just see. I'm just doing a quick survey here. Rabbi says, Ele Mishle Shlomo Asher Hitiku, HaChachamim Shayu Bedoro Shel Chizkiyahu. So the Chachamim in those generations. V'yidmeh shebe'avur zeh hifrida mi'hamashalim ha'acherim, ki'elu hamashalim laktum mi'mashalav ha'chachamim ha'hem. So this is why these are separated from the other mashalim, because these mashalim were gathered from the mashalim of these chachamim. V'ulam hamashalim shekadam zakram nimtzu b'ofen hanizkar b'divrei Shlomo. So different origins. Shadal. Okay, so Shadal is going to be very late and did not have any qualms about like relying on academic sources in his day, but then that was also a new field back then of like biblical scholarship. Shlomo Amar Shloshes Alafim Mashal, right? So that is a thing that in Sefer Malachim it says Shlomo Melech said 3,000 mashalim. Okay, so the question is, if you count up all the psukim in Mishlei, let's say on average there are 30 psukim in each parak, and there are 31 prakim, so you're talking like 900 ballpark, mashalim, even though some of them are like longer or shorter. So the question is, what happened to all the other mashalim? So he says, Kol shash hayabal la'oznav eze ma'asem yuchad. Anytime he heard something, haya omer alav mashal v'limud chachma. Oh, that's great. Okay, that's like your daily practice would be v'avadav hayu kosvim osam, and his servants would write them. V'nisharu b'veis hamelech gimel alafim me'osam mashalim. So there were 3,000 of these in the house of the king. Tear dropping because we don't have all of them. Vizman min hazmanim o gam b'chai Shlomo, and at a certain time or even during his life, huatuku, I don't know how to pronounce that, k'tzas mehem v'nisparsmu b'kerev Yisrael. So they took the greatest hits, right, and publicized them among Klal Yisrael. Or I don't know, greatest hits, the ones that presumably were most necessary for his purposes. The afrakach anshe Chizkiya chazru l'laket ubiru mitoch osam gimel alafim od k'tzas mashalim v'hem haksuvim mikan v'elach v'otzium la'or. Yeah, right. Okay, so that's a good indication to the other way, that according to Tanach, Shlomo wrote more mashalim than the ones that we have. And so, the presumption would be if they're going to include these mashalim, presumably they would come from Shlomo, even though it's not a direct thing. Okay, Malbim says nothing. Ho'il Moshe, no. Targum, Midrash Mishlei. Oh, we can look at the Midrashim later. I'm just looking for. Oh, Ibn Kaspi. Here we go. He's going to say something probably controversial. Let's see. Gam El Mishlei Shalom Kasher. Tchapes Heitev B'chol Mash Asi Lizkor Timshe Shirov Mamar Nishnim Im Mash Kadam Zachar Tam. Okay, so he says, if you investigate these mashalim, you'll find that the majority of these statements are repetitions of what was already mentioned. Ratzoni hakavana, meaning the same idea. Aval hadimyonim misrafim, but the allegories are different. Gam timsa hadimyonim hasidim rabim me'asher hayilafan livnim, and then some of the allegories are also the same. Kamo mefitz v'cherev shot lasus pachem legachalim v'chein rabim. V'amnam lefi dati lo hayazeh mechibur Sefer Mishlomo. So he says, I don't think that this was composed by Shlomo. There were statements that Shlomo made at different times, and on different things, based on whatever happened. Okay, so that's similar to what Shadal was saying. Shadal was saying, right? Yeah. Okay, we're almost through my go-tos, but then I want to show you where this Canaanite might come in. Okay, Metzudas is the last one. Yira ki mitchilas sefer adhena hayu muatak biad hakol umikan ad sofo lo haya muatak ki im biyudei anshe Chizkiah melech Yehuda asher hetiku advarim ha'ela misifrei Shlomo asher hinizam lehem ulezeh amar gam ela mishlei Shlomo Ratzlomer im ki lo nimtzu biad hakol mikumachum gam ela devarav asher hetiku anshe Chizkiah hima ne'amanim al hadavar So it sounds like he's saying that the first ones were widespread, and then these were only spread after Anshe Chizkiyahu. So maybe what your teacher was talking about is in chapter 30, you got the mystery folks. Okay, you have chapter 30. Divri Agur Binyake Hamasa Neum Hagever Leitiel V'ukal. Okay, so these are the words of Agur Binyake. Hamasa, the vision, Nu'um, that was said by Hagever, the man, Etiel, and then Etiel v'uchal. So the questions are like, who are these people? Let's see how they translate. The oracle, the man says to Etiel and Uchal. Okay. And then later on, you have oh, sorry, that's the next parak. And then in 31, you have Divrei Lemuel Melech Masa Asher Yisar to Imo. So these are the words of Lemuel Melech, who the vision that was his mother rebuked him with. Okay, so a lot of the Mefarshim say that these are all just Shlomo Melech, right? And that these are nicknames. For example, I bet Rashi says that. Yeah, Divrei Agur ben Yaakov, Divrei Shlomo she'agar es habina v'hikia. So this is a weird mashal that he gathered the bina and then vomited it. Okay, kach pirshu chachamim. So that's from Chazal apparently. And then Numa Gever Etiel Amar HaGever Shlomo Hamas Hazeh Al Atzmo Bishvil Etiel Al Shesamach Al Chachmaso Laharbos Kesef Zahav. So what Etiel literally means what? Yeah, God is with me, right? So he says that is referring to the fact that he relied on his chachma, laharbos kesef zahav, laharbos susim, laharbos nashim, shehusuru shelo lasos kain. V'hu amar etiel. He says God is with me. V'arbe nashim v'lo yasur levavi. I'm going to get more wives, and my heart will not deviate. Arbe zahav lo asur, arbe susim v'lo ashiv es ha'am mitzrayim. And then etiel v'uchal also was uchal mean. Yeah, I am able, right? Bishvil l'shamar iti kel v'uchal la'asos. God is with me and I can act, right? V'lo ekashal, and I will not stumble. Okay, and I bet he says the same thing for Lemuel. Let's see. Divrei Shlomo Melech she'amar lemo hakadosh baruch hu klomer bishvil shehe'ava kenegad hamakom. So, where's lemo? He sinned against the Holy One. Lemo's to my mouth. The words that the king said for the sake. So that's going to be the most conservative, like in terms of, that's what Chazal are going to say. But I'll bet you like actual money that the academics say that these are from other people, and I'm not going to search through right now, but I'll see if I can like look at. I bet Alter in his Mishlei thing would say, and we'll see if that was like if there's theories about who these came from. But so just to answer your original question, I'm not aware of anyone who like ascribes the main portion of Mishlei to anyone other than Shlomo.
She was ascribing.
Okay.
I think she was saying that parts of it.
Right.
And that part of that is showing, right, that Chachma is not just something that exists within the Jewish tradition, but it's something that can come from people who are
right. I'd say the other place to look is on the commentaries on the name Koheles, because what does Koheles mean? Kahal, Hakel, the gatherer. Yeah, so he's called the gatherer because he gathered wisdom from all these places. So I don't know if anyone says it's specifically from, well, the Metzudas David says that he's called Koheles because he says, thank you. That's why it reads like Rashi. Metzudas David. He says, I'll just paraphrase. He says that he gathered opposing opinions that are against each other and against the Torah, and then sorted out which ones are correct and which ones are not, which is why you find heretical statements in Koheles, which is why Chachamim wanted to like ban it, So that might also be like, indication. Like if someone asked me, how do we see that Shlomo Melech got Chachma from others? I would point to Koheles, as or Agur, which is the same thing that he gathered, but yeah. Okay, that was a good question.
Heretical statements.
Heretical statements, yes. Yeah, like
actually, like they're heretical, or they read.
Well, they read heretically, and you need to understand that he's only bringing them up in order to refute them or to show the the problems. Like the one that they say is the Gemara lists a bunch of examples, but Samach b'chur b'yaldusecha. That you should like rejoice in your heart and in the sight of your eyes. And then Moshe Rabbeinu in the Torah says, or Hashem says, don't go after your eyes, or there are statements that seem to imply, that man and animal just die and then that's it. And there's no difference between a man and an animal. That the only advantage of man over the animal is nothingness and everything is futile, so that's going against Torah. Yeah. Isaac?
Yeah, I have a totally different question.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So how can you tell if you are using your time well?
How can I tell? If I may lead with a, hold on, let me just see if this is relevant. In James Clear's most recent, in the 321 newsletter, everyone should subscribe.
I actually recently unsubscribed as part of my push to unsubscribe from like getting too many notifications.
Yeah, good for you for that decision. Bad decision to unsubscribe from him. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I think that's why the 321 newsletter is something that's worthy, because it's literally just 6 statements. But if the notification thing is the thing that is bothering you, then I see why you can.
It's to go to the opposite extreme and then come back to the middle.
Okay, I've heard of a Jewish scholar who says you should do that. All right, so he says. This is not directly to answer your question, but I'll read it because I got here. Before you throw more time at the problem, throw more focused attention at the problem. You don't need more time, you need fewer distractions, right? That's a very deep work-based thing. Spoiler alert, not also directly related to your question, but I'm scheduled to give the Sunday shiur. For a second I thought it was this Sunday. No, it's 2 Sundays from now.
Gotta go, guys.
Yeah, I think I'm going to call it how checking your phone causes you to sacrifice your soul. Checking your phone during learning, okay, right? So it's going to be about the distractions, okay? But that's the plan here. Okay, but anyway, how do you know you're using your time well?
You just made a big sacrifice for us.
Yes, but that was part of the learning. Yeah. So how do you know you're using your time well? Well, I guess using your time well is at least 2 components, right? There's what are you devoting it to, and then there's how efficiently are you using it the time that you've devoted to that thing, right? Let's say, for example, we would all say that like devoting your time to learning is something that you should do, but during that learning time, are you actually maximizing the learning that you're doing? And so those are two questions. So the first question about how to prioritize, like what to devote the limited hours that you have to, that's a much harder question. But in terms of both of them are hard questions. I gotta think about that one. I don't have immediate answers.
Yeah, because I think I think it's hard to tell whether the way that what things I'm choosing, like the way I'm choosing to allot with different time throughout the week, whether that is the right choice. Like I can tell whether like I think it's much easier to tell whether I'm making the most of
the time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are. Okay. Well, first of all, like this goes without saying, but the answer is going to change depending on where you're at in your development in your life. And like let's say take learning, right? Like there's there's Rebbe's shir about the allocation of learning time, that really addresses that question. Whether or not that's relevant to you is a question you have to ask on your own. But like, there are priorities for what you should do when you are solely or not solely devoted to Torah, but like this is the time that you have to be in yeshiva. There's time you should use for that. And then once you start working, there's like, then priorities shift,
What year is that?
What year is that?
Yeah.
Let's find out. It's not in D. Yeah. I accidentally clicked on security and wealth. Not that that's a mistake. Allocation 165. Yeah, allocation of time for learning. Yeah. What were you gonna say, Chaim? You had an answer? Yeah, so you go.
Oh no, I have a question.
Oh yeah, question. Okay. Yeah, you have an answer? Yeah.
It's not an answer,
Yeah.
but I think one barometer is having goals or things that you're trying to be accomplishing and seeing if you're actually making progress towards those things.
Right.
If you're not, then you know that something's going wrong, either within the amount of time that you're spending on it, or the efficiency of the time.
That's good. Yeah, that's definitely a good barometer. So in other words, that's showing a crossover between the two categories I mentioned, right? Which is that, let's say like on paper, this is something you should spend your time on, but if you're not really making progress on that, or the progress that you're making is at a cost that detracts from your ability to grow and be productive in other areas, then maybe you shouldn't be allocating your time to that. That's another thing in the newsletter this week that in his question, I think he says at the end, and again, the point of the question in the newsletter is to prompt thinking, not to be like, it's not a rhetorical question. How would my daily schedule change if I did a little more of what I'm great at and a little less of what I'm not great at, right? So that's, again, something that if you don't know how to read Gemara, we should not say like, oh, then I shouldn't try, like it's just a question of like, especially when you're out there beyond yeshiva essentially is a preparation phase for a life of learning. So when you're in the actual life of learning phase, then the question has to be like, at what point do I devote more time to the thing that like I'm actually like thriving in and less time to the thing that I'm not. I got to think more about your question. I suspect that the answer is going to first come to me in the form of rookie mistakes, about like, for example, big rookie mistake. People default into using their time the same way because they don't re-examine the decision. Like you set up a certain priority of like how much time you spend on learning, how much time you spend on leisure, whatever. And then you don't question whether you need more of that or less of that, when your life circumstances change or as you develop, that's like a rookie mistake, or another one is devoting time to things because that's what all your peers or your authority figures say that you should do, like sometimes they're wrong, or they just don't, or they're right, but not right now, so I feel like that's going to be the form that my answer is going to take if I get an answer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking about what Sean said. I feel like it's there's a trap in terms of evaluating how well you're meeting your goals, because if you're like me and you set goals that are probably too ambitious, you will fall into the trap of lo like more. Then like I found it can be disheartening when I'm like, oh, I want to, finish learning all of Shas in depth, and I haven't been making good progress towards that because, like
that's right. That's another rookie mistake, is tafasta merubah tafasta. Like if you try to do too much, you're not going to get anything done, and or you get into decision paralysis where you end up doing just a little bit of everything and then not actually. I mean, there's two types of tafasta merubah tafasta, right? There's trying to get everything done and then getting so little in anything that you don't actually make progress, and then there's like crash and burn tafasta merubah tafasta. You try to take on too much and then you can't take it. What were you saying?
Oh yeah, that as far as like the advice from the Rabbi or whatever other people are doing.
Yeah.
Like even if they probably would be right, the problem isn't so much their advice as that maybe you didn't describe your circumstances well enough to them,
right?
That they could know how to really.
Right, and it could be you don't know your circumstances well enough. Yeah, right.
And that's probably coming from like what you were saying, which is, and that's probably the source of why you didn't examine the things that you're doing. Yeah. One
of the nice things about getting older is that the older you get, let me rephrase that. One of the nice things about getting older and being self-aware, because you can get older and not be self-aware, is that you get to know yourself really, really well in terms of this question, knowing what is going to be a good investment of time, given my personality and my aptitudes, strengths and weaknesses. So yeah, Sean, what were you saying?
Yeah, just in response to what I was saying. So I definitely think that's right. And I think that's why setting correct goals is going to be the most important thing to then having that barometer. I mean, if you don't set the right goals, then you're not going to have that barometer, and then you're not going to be able to tell whether or not the time that you're investing is being efficient and proper in the amount of time.
Right. That's a good point, is having ways to measure. To measure whether you're meeting your goals and to what extent and how fast. And
so making sure to have those measurements beforehand. That way you can then have something to evaluate.
Right. Although I will say also that like anything, then there's upsides and downsides, and in certain areas, then if your goals and objectives are too rigid and inflexible, it will either block you from discovering new goals and objectives, or it will inhibit you from making adjustments. Like if you're too focused on the goal that you set for yourself, then it will, then that can actually interfere with the process, and sometimes without you even realizing it. Again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't set goals, but also, I just feel like I have to convey this message, even though it's not directly related to what you're saying, because this has been in my head. So this is something I heard from Avi Gross, who said that the best advice that he got in these past months was someone who told him, I forgot who it was, who said, do your best, but don't try so hard. Okay. And he said that at first it sounds like counterintuitive. First of all, it sounds like a paradox, right? Like, isn't doing your best, involve trying hard, but what was that?
No, it was in Gambate, Japanese.
Oh, okay. but there is, I think what it's speaking, my understanding of it is what it's speaking to is like, there is this franticness of that certain people, especially type A personalities, are prone to, of like, I have to like that kind of thing. And the way that you relate to your goals does not need that franticness, because what's the rush and what's the pressure? Like, does this actually help the process or not? Like, if you examine it, you'll mostly find, I think people who are prone to laziness, mishleik or otherwise, need to put artificial pressure on themselves sometimes in order to even like get involved in the activity. But the type A personalities that are already driven, that type of excess trying is just going to make them relate to the process in a way that stresses them out, and it puts pressure on themselves, and makes them feel like failures when they don't live up to their circumstance, their goals. And I think that's a wise piece of information that's generally relevant to this. Okay.
I missed the Wi-Fi cut out, and
oof, it's cutting out now. Also,
you said do your best, but try so hard.
Try so hard with capital T. Don't try so hard. Yeah.
The word "don't" was there, right?
I'll type it out for you.
Yeah.
Do your best, but don't try so hard. Yeah.
It's like the master.
Yeah. Didn't Master Yoda say the other?
He said, do it or not.
There's no try. Okay, yeah, right. Yeah. Slightly different message, but good advice also. Yeah, fine.
Oh, okay. I got a point. Two questions.
Okay. Would you like a coin?
Sure.
Okay. I found a coin this morning.
I'll flip it a coin.
Okay, so heads first question, tails. Okay. All right, let's try that again. Oh, no, let's use the good coin. The death coin.
The death coin?
Tails.
Tails, okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty then. So that starts with like an easy question, and then I think like more not difficult.
Okay.
K'layim applies outside of Eretz too, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
sorry. I thought you were talking about K'layim of the Beged. You're talking about K'layim
of
Okay, so that is I always have to look it up because certain things are directly I have to look up. Hold on just a second. Because there's different types of K'layim, right?
Yeah.
I assume the fact that you're asking this means it's necessary for the other part of the question, right?
Like lav dafka, but
okay. Let's just look at K'layim. Okay. Eretz Yisrael. Okay. Hazoreh shnei minei zra'im k'echad be'eretz Yisrael loke. Okay, so if you plant two types of plantings, I don't know, seeds. I don't know if here seeds includes more than that. In Eretz Yisrael, you get malchus. Okay, and hold on just a second. V'echad hazoreh o hanichbash o hamachapeh kagon blah 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 blah. V'echad hazoreh be'aretz of
The bottom of that.
Bottom of bet. Aval hazoreh gimel. Yeah. Right. Right. But again, you have to look at each type of K'layim, because there's different kinds. Right. There's Zra'im, there's Tavua in the Kerem, there's Harbaz Behema, so yeah.
Okay, so then this might touch on all of those.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of a food forest?
No, that sounds awesome.
So I recently found out about it.
Yeah.
And basically it's a form of gardening where you have like your canopy trees, and then you have your smaller trees, and then like bushes and shrubs, and then like your root vegetables, and then you have like vines also as part of the
forest.
So like yes. So
right.
So the question is like what
so you're like planting an ecosystem.
Basically,
yeah, right.
Like,
I mean not a full ecosystem.
And it like there's a lot of benefits to kind of gardening.
Yeah.
So the question is like, are there halachic problems with that? And let's say both in and outside of Eretz Yisrael. Right. Based on like the laws of K'layim. I am not holding in laws of K'layim, so go forth and learn. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Zia?
Question on the surface.
Yeah, sure.
What would be a good like safer source, I guess, to learn about the ethics, like halakhic, I guess, ethics of like keeping somebody alive? Let's say you have like someone in the hospital. And,
medical ethics?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. So the good news is that there's tons of English books on this topic. I don't know of any names of the books, but Rabbi Cinnamon gave me a book on that, which I have at home. Or not a book on that, a book on like Jewish medical ethical questions, which I can look at. I think if I remember correctly, the classical text on questions of that nature, Gesher HaChaim, the Bridge of Life. I think that was no, that's the Laws of Mourning. Unless he's the one who wrote it, or is it Nesher HaChaim? No, that's I don't know. Ask Rabbi Cinnamon. I feel like that's his wheelhouse. Okay. In terms of like keeping up to date on like modern halakhic literature. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so in the Torah,
Jewish
descent seems to be patrilineal.
Jewish descent. Okay, not descent like argumentation. Yeah.
All right, and that it's father to son. You don't hear about any recordings of like fathers.
Right.
And then it shifts to that the way in which Judaism is actually passed down is matrilineal. Yeah. So is there a shift that's happening there? Is there a specific reason why the focus is patrilineal in the Torah, and then halakhically is matrilineal, and like where does that whole phenomenon?
Okay, so this is a hot topic, one that I don't know about, so I'm going to end up saying I don't know, but it is a hot topic because nowhere in Torah B'Ksav does it say that your Jewish identity is determined by your mother, right? So this is clearly like the case in Torah B'Peh, but the question is, where does that come from, and when did this come from? So the more modern scholarship is going to say that it was introduced at a later period of time. We will say, like the mainstream, whatever, will say that it was just, Torah B'Peh at Sinai. And then I think there are in-between opinions, which are intermingled into the question of what right do the Rabbanan have in Torah B'Peh to reinterpret the psukim and like come up with new halachos. And that I need to check and see. I don't even want to say the name of the person, but I need to see that there might be one Achron who does hold that that Chazal actually like instituted this, as some sort of measure, and I don't remember the reason why.
Well, you can always know who the mother is.
That's definitely true, right. And I've heard that as an explanation, but I'm not sure if that is an entirely satisfying thing, because we have such thing as chazaka in Hebrew, right? Like, and chazaka is used to determine. First of all, what was it?
Is it talked about in the Gemara?
About this particular issue, I would imagine it is. Yeah, but for example, whether someone's a Kohen or not, that has huge halakhic ramifications. But how do we determine it based on chazaka? Or you have all these cases where a woman comes to town and she's.
Tribe is patrilineal.
Was it?
Tribe is patrilineal.
Yeah, right, but I'm saying like it can't just be a simple. People say like, oh, the reason why it's matrilineal, why Jewish identity is matrilineal is because we know for sure who the mother is, and I'm saying that there are huge issues that are talui on patrilineal descent that we rely on chazaka. So why couldn't we do that with
What exactly is the chazaka in that?
I also am not brushed up on the halachos about with the Kohen thing, but
just a rough example.
Well, rough example is if you are raised with this person being your father and you have every reason to assume it's your father, then that carries over. Yeah.
So not if there's a question on it. He was himself. Like, I thought it meant maybe like, oh, it was like, turns out now we've thought we were Cohens for 3-4 generations, and now we've found.
So there are cases like that also. And again, the case I'm most familiar with is I know some of you know the story about how my dad was decahunified. Right? Is that story? No, so the story is so facts are my mom was not Jewish and my dad is Jewish, right? So my dad was raised to think that my dad was raised as a Kohen, right? Like he has memories of his grandfather who was an Orthodox Jew taking him to shul to duchen, to do Gerus Kohanim, right? So all this time, my dad is a Kohen, right? So then we come to Judaism, fast forward through that part, that whole thing. And I convert and Johnny converts and my mom converts. And how do my parents get married? Because a Kohen can't marry a Gioras, right? So before this was put into place a long time before my mom converted, but they asked the Rav of our shul, Rabbi Kornfeld, who apparently, there are times when we say you should not shop around for a posek, but then there are times we say you should. And like Shalom Bayis is one of those areas where you where you often should, but this is not just a Shalom Bayis issue because we're dealing with Isuri Bia here, so the Rav of our shul did not paskin on this, but he, I think, searched over the course of like a year or more to see if there was any posek who would paskin that find out some halachic solution for my parents to get married. So he found a posek, and I don't know who it is, but
he wanted to be decodified.
Yeah. So this posek said that since my dad was raised irreligious and his dad was raised irreligious and no one in the family is religious, then there's no chazaka to rely upon that he was ever a Kohen. But like all chazakos, if you find out a fact that contradicted, then the chazaka falls away. So the psak that Rabbi Kornfeld gave my dad is, retroactively, you were never a Kohen. Don't look for information. And so what happens from time to time, and this, I'm not exaggerating, this happens like every couple of years. Someone will ask me, do you know the Schneeweises in Mexico? Okay, so there's Schneeweises in Mexico. And like the answer is it'd be cool if we got to meet them, but we never pursued it because if we find out that the Kohanim, then that's a big issue, Now, the epilogue is that my parents are now divorced, so there's no more ramifications for this in terms of that. So like, I don't think there's anything bad if we find out that like my my dad is going now. But as a funny like result of this, I don't know when this started. I deeply identify with other Kohanim and with Shevet Levi. And I don't know if other members of Shevet Levi feel this way, but there is a certain feeling of like being part of the Shevet, and Kohanim definitely, you look at the way Kohanim carry themselves around, Kohanim definitely feel that. So again, I'm not halachically a Kohen, but like in terms of, I identify way more with Levim and Kohanim by blood than, let's say, Chinese ancestry, I feel like I'm a Levi, a Kohen and a Levi at heart, Yeah.
When you did genetic testing, was that a factor? Because I know there's
Yes, I don't think they could detect the Cohen gene in the types of genetic testing that people use. I've never heard of anyone saying that they could do that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought that was the thing.
I think you can get, it is detectable, but I don't think it's a thing. And I don't know what halacha says about genetic data for that reason. Yeah. So going back to the original question, which was Matrilineal Descent. Yeah. So, So I was saying for the chazakos, right? For how do you know that someone's a Kohen? The other example of chazaka is like, the Rambam has those halachos in East Arabia by converts of, let's say a woman comes into town and she is noheg like a Jewess, and and you can't, you assume that she's Jewish, and let's say she has a child, I guess this is not just about Jewish, but how do you know that a woman who comes to town is actually that this is her son, like that she says is her son, she knows. Yeah, right. Or adoption or something like that. And this has big ramifications in terms of the most severe of arayos, So my point being that it's a simple answer to say, well, we make it matrilineal because that we know, but that's not how halacha operates. Yeah. So I have to look into that question also. I got to see, there is someone, if you remind me, if I forget, I can look it up. The person I'm thinking of who might say this in my apartment. He's not in my apartment. His book is in my apartment, so I can look it up. Yeah. And I'm sure there's a lot of articles about this also. Okay, we have time for another short question. Yeah.
I think this is a short question.
Okay.
Another one.
The question is short. I don't know if the answer.
I wrote it down. Was I'm just gonna read it. Why does it seem like we don't give the same level of attention to the Geonim as we do to the Rishonim?
Okay, why does it seem like we don't give the same level of attention to the Geonim as we do to the Rishonim? So the simple answer is that there are not that many Geonic writings that were made or preserved. Okay, so you have the late Geonim who do write stuff, and you have the Shuvos HaGeonim literature, but they didn't really write tons of Sfarim. The most they did was writing, they wrote Shuvos. The Rambam says it's in the Hakdama to the Pirush, to the Mishnah Torah. Let me just get it really quickly. He says what they wrote. Oh, I have a whole huge Geonim thing to go through in Rambam B'Kiyos. This is I'll pitch it afterwards. Okay, Geonim. Yeah, so he says, V'shelos rabos sholin anshe ir l'chol gaon shehi b'meihem l'farish lahem devarim kashim shebetalmud. So people asked in every city, they asked the gaon in their days these difficult questions in the Talmud. V'hem yeshivim lahem k'vi chachmasam v'osin hasholin mekabzin hatshuvos v'osim hem svarim lahavim mehem. So that was the interesting thing, right? Is that the Gemara was still kind of fresh at the point. So the only svarim beyond Gemara were these chuvos from the Geonim that they learned from. Gam chibur hagonim mishubchol dor chiburim levar haTalmud. They also made compendiums on the Talmud, like Rabbeinu Hananel and Rabbeinu Gershom is not a Gaon. Rabbeinu Hananel and Rabbeinu Nisim Gaon. What was it? Yeah, I believe so. Hananel ben Chushiel. I think. Well, let me make sure I'm not making up a fact. Hananel ben Chushiel. Was in close contact with the last of the Gaonim. Yeah, not a Gaon. My bad. Chushiel, was he a Gaon? I don't know.
Who's after? Yeah,
I guess. Yeah.
He's one of the 4 prisoners.
Yeah.
Who are the 4 prisoners?
Oh, this is an awesome story. Okay, I gotta read the story. This is one of those. If there's going to be a movie about the Geonim, sorry, not about the Geonim, about Chacham Yisrael of that period, then this is an awesome story. Oh yeah, this is in So shortly before the decline, I'm reading from the Rishonim book. Shortly before the decline of the Babylonian Geonim, Providence arranged for an occurrence in 990 CE. Okay, the Geonic period ended in 1030 CE with the death of Rabbi Gaon. That would have far-reaching consequences for the entire diaspora and free its Jews from their dependence upon the Babylonian academies and their scholars. 4 great Torah scholars, this reads like a legend, but it's actually factually true. 4 great Torah scholars from southern Italy embarked on a sea voyage to raise money for the Torah academies of their country. The 4 sages were Rav Moshe ben Chanoch, Rav Chushiel, who's the father of Hanano, Rav Shmari ben Elchanan, and a 4th whose identity and fate are unknown. En route, they were captured by Ibn Rumahis, a Moorish Spanish pirate in the service of the Spanish Caliph, who decided to offer them for ransom to 4 different communities along the Mediterranean coast. The rabbis wisely kept their identity secret for fear that Ibn Rumahis would extort huge sums for their freedom. The pirate carried out his plan with an outcome that was of historic benefit to Jewish life. Rav Moshe, together with his young son Chanoch, was ransomed by the Jews of Cordoba under the leadership of Chait bin Shaprut. The community soon recognized the erudition and eminence of the captive and appointed him their spiritual leader. Rav Moshe promptly established an academy and was succeeded by his son Rabbi Chanoch. Between them, they raised a new generation of scholars who would not have to look to Babylon for guidance on every question. Rav Shmuel Hanagid, Talmud scholar par excellence, poet and statesman, was one of his disciples. He was virtually the ruler of that region. Wow. Other yeshivos, he even had his own military. Other yeshivos were later established in other Spanish cities. The study of Torah received a further impetus with the arrival in 1088 of the Rif from Morocco. Okay, great community. Another of the captives, Rav Chushiel, was brought to the shores of Tunisia, where he accomplished in the city of Kairouan what Rav Moshe did in Cordoba. His son, the famous Talmud commentator Rabbi Hanano, and his illustrious disciple Rav Nisim Gaon ben Yaakov continued his work of making North Africa a major Torah center that became independent of Babylon in matters of Talmudic scholarship. And Johnny went there to visit there, so you can ask him about that community. The 3rd sage, Rav Shmari ben Elchanan, was ransomed in Egypt. He established an academy in Cairo where he was succeeded by his son Rav Elchanan. As a result, Cairo too became a thriving Jewish community and an important center of Torah knowledge. And the 4th one went to Atlantis, which sunk into the ocean. And we don't, but I was going to say that I'm wrapping up here. Rav Shmuel Hanagid, yeah, and he was basically like the king said, basically like you rule for me, do whatever you want. So they wrote things to explain the Talmud. Mehem mi shapirish halachos yichidos. Some of them explain specific halachos. Mehem mi shapirish prakim yichidim shniskashu v'yamav. Okay, so v'od chibru, so they made these commentaries, and then v'od chibru halachos psukos b'inyan ha'asar v'muter v'hachayva pater v'dvarim shasad tzrich lahem. So they made halacha books, kadeshihu krovin lamada mi she'eno yachol ler la'omko shel Talmud, so that they could be accessible to people who couldn't descend to the depths of the Talmud. V'zohi melachas Hashem b'chol she'asu ba'kol ge'onei Yisrael miyom shechubar ha'Talmud v'ad man zeh. Okay, so that's what the Geonim did until now. But then the Rambam says people couldn't understand the Geonic works, and they became difficult to understand. And then that's when the Rambam wrote the Mishnah Torah. So factual answer to your question is they didn't write as much. Also, you remember Gaon was an official position, right? So the only people who were really doing the major writings were the actual Geonim, of which there was one in every same reason there aren't a lot of presidential writings, because there's not a lot of presidents, and they're also very difficult and hard to access, and we don't have them. And then at the Rishonic era, then things changed. Yeah. Okay. So I want to do this thing from the Nachmanides book I read from Halbertal, where he goes through. There's a 3-way machlokus between the Geonim, the Rambam, and the Ramban on what the nature is of halachic truth, where machlokus comes from, and what we make of what we make of Torah path. Yeah, I know. So I just have to find some time to do it. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe that could be a good Sunday share topic.
Maybe. I think not, for different reasons. Yeah. Okay. But yeah. Okay. Have a good Shabbos, everyone.
Thanks, you too.